All right, so here we have my version 2 Sportshift harness. There's been a few changes made as well as several upgrades, and this was mostly done because of version 1 feedback from various customers, as well as new discoveries I made in the process of making these harnesses and just things that I thought up over time. So on the left, right here, we have the bulk harness, and that's going to consist of a black plug over here that goes to your power hold button or eco hold button, a white plug right here, which is going to go to the sport shifter itself for sport mode, upshift and downshift. Over here, we have the plug that goes to this special connector, and that's going to go to the TCU or TCM, transmission control unit or module. And then right here, we have a new plug for connecting to this harness over here, which is for adding the JDM Legacy or JDM SH Forester paddle shifters. And then lastly, we have a ring terminal out here and a ring terminal right here. This is going to be the chassis ground for the paddle shifters, and this is going to be the chassis ground for the rest of the harness. Now, first things first, the connectors for the power hold button or eco hold button have not changed, which is this black one right here. And then the connector for the sport shifter itself also has not changed. I added a plug for the paddle shifter to the rest of the harness right here. What that allows you to do is install the entire harness without needing to add this right away if the paddles are something you're not going to do until later on. The next major change to the harness is going to be this connector right here, with these pins being the pins that go into the TCU connector. And what I have done is I have made it so that this is able to plug directly into the rest of the harness, while you can use these to pin into the TCU so that you don't have the whole harness connected to the entire setup while you're trying to get that done. I'm going to detach this and we can take a look at that now. All right, so here is the connector that goes back to the rest of the harness, as well as the pinned wires that go into the connector body at the TCU. Now, the reason that I made this is because it's a lot easier to insert each of the pins without the rest of the harness connected. The second reason is because sometimes people make mistakes. And if you accidentally say, put this orange pin right here where the green pin is supposed to go, well, now your orange pin, which is meant for activating sport mode, is in the pin slot for the upshift, which is the green wire. So there's a special tool you need in order to remove the pins from the TCU connector. It's very expensive and it's also a little difficult to use. So what would you do in that situation? Well, in case you need to fix that, you would swap the green and the orange wires at this connector, which is much easier to depin by using a technique that's similar to the OEM connector that goes to the TCU. You would take this connector and you would come around and you would pop up the edge right here. Boom. You can see it only pops up a tiny bit. And now you would get a flat tool similar to this one right here, and you would come over to your connector body. Now with the lock popped up and unlocked, you would insert your flat tool in here. You'd lift up on the tang and you'd be able to slide that pin out, and you do the same thing with the green one and just flip-flop them. And then you just insert it back in and you go back around and you push the lock back down in. This makes it easier to pin and also easier to fix your mistakes. Moving on to the second update on the V2 harness, which is the paddle shifter adapter. You can see here that we have the plug that is meant to go to the paddles, and we have a plug that goes to the rest of the harness, and then a very long ground terminal or cord for the ground terminal, which is labeled, and this is going to be a chassis ground. You also have a label that shows you 2 paddles, which goes to the white connector, and then you have a label that also says 2 harness, which feeds directly to this gray connector here. And that's going to come right around here to this at the rest of the harness and plug right in as so. All right, as you can see, what I have here is the actual sports shifter itself, as well as the harness and the power hold button. Again, the white connector right here is going to go into the black connector right here. The existing white connector that's already in your car is going to go into this white connector right here. This black connector right here is going to go into your power hold button, and then your ground terminal or your ground strap is going to go to chassis ground. Let's go ahead and get that connected now. All right, so we have our harness undone, and the first thing we're going to go ahead and hook up right here is going to be the connection to the sport shifter, and that's going to be your up switch, your down shift, and your sport mode. Put that off to the side. And then now we have our power hold button, and that's going to plug in right there. So now our power hold button is set up, and that goes into the shifter trim. And then we have our ground strap, which is going to be chassis ground, and there is ample amount of cord here in order for you to run this to an appropriate location. And coming around to the other side of the harness, this is where everything's going to plug in underneath your dash. You can see here we have a 2-plug type connector. The type of TCU and connector type that you have will vary based on the year, make, and model. This one happens to be the 2-plug style. And so you are going to go ahead and remove the TCU and the bracket, disconnect the plugs, and you're going to insert your terminals into the empty slots in here in order to connect them to the TCU. So let's go ahead and move this off to the side, and you can see here this one is disconnected. On this side, what you can see is that there is a lock that you need to spring up, and it will raise up a very small amount, and then the empty slots will be indicated on the instructions to tell you where to insert the wires. So once you get all of these inserted into those empty slots, this is going to connect to the rest of your harness, your bulk harness. And so we go right around to here and we insert that like so. And you can see that this is labeled TCU. And then if you are installing the paddles, you'll go ahead and grab your paddle shifter harness and you will plug that in as well. And now you have that connected. And then you'll go ahead and grab your ground strap and chassis ground your paddles as well. And with everything hooked up, you can see that over here we have our sport shifter connector plugged in. We have our power hold switch connector plugged in. We have our ground strap and ring terminal for chassis ground. We come under the dash and we go to the connector for the pinned wires to the TCU. And then if and when you install the paddles, we have our 2-pin connector going out to the 3-pin connector for the paddles and a ground strap and ring terminal for that as well. So that's everything on the V2 harness in a nutshell. If you have any additional questions, please let me know and I'll be happy to answer.